self-inflicted wounds and how the Packers are committing too many of them. Great teams don't do that. And sure, the Packers can sit there and say we're a great team, or they can say we're close. But at some point, you can't just get close, because the next time against one of these teams that you get close, that's all you have.
Yeah.
It's getting close. It's a silver lining. Your season's going to be over if you get close without anything to show for it.
You're asking for my final judgment now?
Yeah, what's your final judgment?
All right. I didn't know if you had wrapped up your final judgment. Yeah, I think my final judgment is, it's not dissimilar to that, and it's not dissimilar to things that I said earlier in the season. If they don't clean up, blah, 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 then they're going to be an easy out. They're going to be a quick out. And right now they're staring at the number 7 seed in the NFC playoffs. I think they are a good team. I really do. I just don't think they're a great team, because if you look at the record against the other elite teams in the NFC, they haven't won a game against the 3 teams that have a better record than they do. And they've had plenty of opportunities, and the games have been close. I do think there's a lot of talent on this Packers team, and perhaps they're just a year and maybe a player or two away. I don't think they're that far off, but they are not in the same caliber as those other 3 teams, specifically Detroit, Minnesota, and Philadelphia. And they've lost to all 3 of those teams for a number of different circumstances. So when I look at this Packers team, I think that we're looking at maybe an early exit, because there have been those opportunities to clean up those things that need to be cleaned up against quality opponents, and they just haven't done it yet. So it's almost like a chicken or the egg type of thing, which came first. But if they don't seriously clean up the things that they've struggled with, the things that you just outlined a moment ago, they're going to be one and done in the playoffs this year, and it's going to be a very disappointing, maybe soul-searching off season. Again, I think there's a lot of talent here. They did a lot of good things this season, but just some of these silly things just keep cropping up and biting him in the rear end.
Yeah, it's the slow starts.
Yeah.
Getting down 10-0 against the Lions, getting down whatever it was yesterday. It was 20-3 at one point, I believe, yesterday.
And it was 3-0 at one point, and they even after Josh Jacobs fumbled the ball back, I mean, the Packers were able to get the ball back and then get themselves in another scoring position and weren't able to punch it in.
Getting down 28-0 the first time against these guys, getting down big in the first half against the Lions the first game. I mean, the Packers just can't afford to keep getting in big holes early against these teams. That was the common refrain post-game, talking to Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur in Minneapolis yesterday. It's the slow starts. It's the self-inflicted wounds, as I mentioned, the pre-snap penalties on offense, the procedural stuff. It's the offsides on defense. It's, the neutral zone infractions that they've had. It's the drops. I mean, they go for it on 4th and 2 from the Vikings 23-yard line. And Jaden Reed gets wide open on the slant. They call the right play. He runs the right route. Jordan Love has him. Now, Jordan Love should put that ball in his chest. He puts it a little too far out in front of him. Jaden Reed has to make kind of a falling catch, a diving catch, instead of just one standing up and maybe get some yards after the catch. And it doesn't work. You can put that one on Love. You can put that one on Reed. It's got to be a better throw, considering the shortness of the distance there. It's got to be a catch. And that's what Jordan Love said after game. I was a little surprised. I don't blame him for doing this, but I was a little surprised he said, we need to be better, not just I need to be better. And he's right.
No, he's
Jaden
right.
Reed needs to make that catch, even if it is a little off. And that's something that has happened a couple times this season, where Jordan's just a little bit off and he needs to be better, but the receivers also have to make the catch. Packers coaches count these as drops if they hit the guys in the hands. Missed opportunities like that. On the Jacobs fumble, yes, the Packers didn't allow any points off that turnover because the defense held up, but you're moving the ball well on the opening drive. You have a chance to go make a statement in US Bank Stadium, arguably the most raucous away environment in the NFL. 2nd and 4, you run for 7 yards, cough up the ball. Great teams maybe have 1 or 2 of those, but great teams don't do it consistently throughout a game like the Packers do. 12 men in a huddle, that's day one stuff.
Yeah. It is.
And I mean, are the Packers a good team? Like I said, absolutely. Can they win a playoff game? Sure. But they have shown us nothing this season that makes me think they can go on a run in the playoffs. Even last year, yes, they were playing with more house money than they are now. I would still argue they're playing with a little bit as the youngest team in the NFL, but expectations are raised. Last year, they beat the Chiefs and the Lions in the regular season. They don't have a win close to that this year.
Nope.
So they're most likely going to go to Philadelphia in the wild card round because the Packers, with their loss yesterday and the Commanders winning over the Falcons in overtime, dropped to the 7th seed. And I know I've tweeted this out. You've seen it everywhere, but just to lay it out for anyone who hasn't, the only way the Packers can get the 6th seed is if they beat the Bears at Lambeau on Sunday and the Commanders lose to the Cowboys in Arlington. If the Commanders win, doesn't matter if the Packers win. They still get to 7. If the Commanders lose, if the Packers also lose, Packers still get to 7. So they need the Commanders to lose and the Packers to win. Mike McCarthy could help out his former team. Can he get his guys going for one more week? Maybe his last game coaching the Cowboys, but it's most likely going to be a trip to Philadelphia, who has already locked up the number 2 seed because the winner of Vikings-Lions, regardless of what happens with the Lions-49ers game tonight, will get the number 1 seed and home field advantage. It's the bed you made for yourself. Now you got to lie in it.
Absolutely. And then you've got to, wrap your mind around, okay, Philadelphia versus Los Angeles. Not the two teams head-to-head against each other, but listen, if you've got to go to Philadelphia, you got to go to Philadelphia, and you have to embrace it. And if I know that they've had better luck and better success against the Rams than they have the Eagles. You know what? In the playoffs, nobody cares. Doesn't matter. They're capable of beating anybody. They're capable of beating the Eagles. They're capable of beating the Lions. They're capable of beating the Vikings. They just haven't done it for all the things that have been laid out. But you can't shy away from it. You have to embrace it. And you've got to understand what the assignment is. And there have been times when the Packers haven't understood what the assignment is. And, if you lose in week 17, after you've already clinched to, yes, your division rival, but a team that could wind up with the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs, okay, you can survive that. You can, it almost renders next week's game against the Bears, I wouldn't say meaningless because you're still playing for a number 7 seed, but it all depends on whether or not the Commanders win or not. But it's not as important, but the next week there's no forgiveness. If you screw up, you're done. That's it. And your season is over.
Yeah, I think you want to end the regular season on some good vibes, get some momentum going,
especially
into
against
the
a
playoffs.
bad team.
Yeah, and you also want to extend the longest winning streak in the NFL of one team against another.
That's what you want.
Forget going into the playoffs with positive momentum, positive juju. You want to do that. Develop good habits. That's always a good thing. But it's the Bears. Yeah. You always want to beat the Bears. So I don't think,
I'm just saying it's survivable.
It can be a tune-up game for the playoffs, maybe a get-right game, if you will. I would say the Bears could win, but I don't think there's any chance. I would be stunned if the Bears beat the Packers at Lambeau Field on Sunday, especially with the Packers feeling like they need to, fix some stuff before they go into the playoffs. So they're going to be playing all their starters. They still have something to play for. They got to pick themselves up off the mat because, like you said, no one's feeling sorry for them. Xavier McKinney said after the game, we can't sit up here and say that we're on the same level as those teams, meaning the Eagles, Lions, and Vikings. We haven't beat them. If we want to say we're on the same level as them, we got to beat them. Keyshawn Nixon said last night, we can beat anybody. Sure, can beat anybody, but you haven't beaten anybody. I shouldn't say haven't beaten anybody, but they haven't beaten the cream of the crop. And guess what? If the Packers want to go to the Super Bowl, which would shock me, they're going to need to beat the only teams they haven't beaten this year. It's most likely going to be some form of Eagles, Vikings, Lions, Vikings, whatever order it may be. Most likely. And they got to do that. There is no better illustration of where the Packers are right now than one line from Matt LaFleur's post-game presser. Last night, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's just along the same lines as this, we're going to have to earn the right to come back here and play these guys again. It ain't going to be easy. And I thought, oh, that sounds familiar. So I went back in my email, typed earn the right in my search bar, and earn the right pops up on December 5th after the Packers lost to the Lions. And what does Matt LaFleur say? We have to earn the right to come back here, and it's not going to be easy. It's just deja vu. That's what it is. Packers starting slow, showing promise and fight against a good team, but ultimately their pass defense doesn't hold up. Too many self-inflicted wounds. It's the same story. People were getting on me last night for, you want the Packers to lose. No, I want to write the most interesting stories. I want to write different stories. And I want to cover a Super Bowl because it's on my bucket list.
Right. Yeah.
The story last night that I wrote was the same story I wrote 3 weeks ago when they lost to the Lions.
Yeah.
I don't have any interest in writing that again. I literally pulled up an old quote to show exactly how it's the same. The interesting story to write last night would have been Packers finally get over the hump. They're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. That's new. People want to read that. Maybe people want to read this too because they like, anger scrolling and anger reading. The comments on my story would certainly indicate that. I don't root for the team as a fan. I could care less. But it's the stories and it's the relevance. And right now, are the Packers relevant? Of course, they're always going to be, but they might not be relevant in 2 weeks at this time.
Yeah.
Because if they keep playing like this, they ain't going to last long in the postseason, Doug.
If they play like this, we will have a postmortem very quickly. And you don't want that. They also need to get healthy, especially in the defensive secondary. And I know that Ryan Wood asked Matt LaFleur point blank about Jair Alexander earlier today.
That was Rob.
That was Rob? I thought that was Ryan. I'm sorry, Rob. Never mind. So Rob asked Matt LaFleur point blank about Jair Alexander today. Sorry, Rob. And, the answer was, I don't know. I'll let you know when I know. It was
which is not the truth. He's not going to let us know when he knows.
True. But, what we saw yesterday with, the receivers in Minnesota, maybe the best 1-2 punch in all of football with Jefferson and Addison.
Second.
I said maybe the best.
Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I think, are the best.
Pretty good. T. Higgins, he's going to make some money this offseason. Yeah. Okay, so, still elite. Those two guys are both elite, Jefferson and Addison.
Sure. I agree.
So, and I think that they kept, by and large, as much as you could, you kept Jefferson in check because he's just going to get he's that good. But that left other guys open. And when you don't have Jair out there, when you don't have Evan Williams, for example, being able to come up in the slot, that's where teams are going to exploit the Packers. I love the attitude of next man up. I just don't know at this stage of the season how realistic it is when you've got so many injuries in that one area of the field. And the Packers they've been struggling with it most of the season. But now at the end of the season, going into the playoffs, you really need to get those guys back out there.
Yeah, there's a lot to dissect from yesterday's game, and we'll do it all throughout this hour. Jair Alexander, how much is his absence hurting? Are they going to get him back? We'll dive into what Matt LaFleur said today. We'll hear some audio from Matt LaFleur about Tucker Kraft's controversial, maybe not controversial, low block on PJ Jones from the Vikings. Pat Jones, sorry, I should say, of the Vikings. The block that injured him and kept him out the rest of the game with a knee injury. Javon Bullard was rusty in his first game back. What did Matt LaFleur have to say about that? And him being forced to play safety instead of the position he'd been playing for a while, nickel, because Zane Anderson got a concussion. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to get figured out as the Packers head into Week 18 here against the rival Bears and then into the playoffs, likely against the Philadelphia Eagles the following week, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. We'll discuss that and many, many more things here on the Match Schneidman Show. This fine Monday, December 30th, our last show of the new year. No show tomorrow. And again, if you have any thoughts, you want to write them or speak them, 1-877-794-1973, the NicoletLaw.com talk and text line. Those were our final judgments presented by Habush and Rotier National Reputation Hometown Service. Go to habush.com. This is the Matt Schneidman Show. We'll be right back after the break.
In the night sky, like shooting stars. I can really use a wish right now. Wish right now. Wish right now. Yeah. fresh, it's a dream.
Downy Rinse and Refresh. Fights odor in just one wash. Guaranteed.
97.3 The Game.
Attention high school athletic directors and coaches statewide. Iron Jock has a game-changing spirit gear program. They'll heat seal your school's logo on their high-end apparel made of polyester spandex, French terry fleece, and woven fabrics. They don't sell cheap cotton fabric that fades and shrinks, and at their wholesale price, they'll do it. No middleman marking it up another 50%. Contact our guy, Paul Hansen, at ironjock.com. All right, we talked about Jair a little bit in the first segment, and at this point, we just have to dedicate a couple minutes to him each show. Matt LaFleur was asked about him today. First, I asked Matt LaFleur on Friday, I think it was, if I want to remember exactly how I asked it, if the Packers thought Jair could play through the knee injury, but Jair didn't, and there was a disagreement there or frustration, or if they were all on the same page. Matt LaFleur said the injury report will be out at 3. So, as you mentioned, Rob Domofsky follows up today and asks the same question. And Matt LaFleur's answer was that he can't really get into that. He said there's been swelling in the knee. He was asked if Jair will play again for the Packers this year. Matt LaFleur essentially offered a no comment. So do with that what you will. Last year, Jair misses 6 games, I think, with a shoulder injury, suffered midway through the season. Plays week 18. Well, first gets suspended. After the week 16 game, he goes out for the coin toss for. Doesn't play week 17 against the Vikings. Plays week 18 against the Bears, then comes back, has that big-time interception against the Cowboys in the playoffs. I don't know if we're looking at a same late-season return and then playoff resurgence this season. Just doesn't feel like it's going to happen. The comments coming out of Lambeau are too ominous. Jair trended down last week in terms of his practice participation. So if you're a Packer fan, I'm not trying to tell you how to fan, but I would just mentally prepare yourself for playoffs without Jair. If it happens, it's a pleasant surprise, but it may be a situation we're in right now where the Packers think he can push through whatever knee injury he's playing through, but he doesn't think so. But if Matt LaFleur says they're swelling, maybe they're on the same page and they just both agree that the knee isn't reacting how it should. So where we are now, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, if he returns for the playoffs, Zane Anderson, if he's healthy after his concussion that he suffered, making a bone-crunching tackle on kickoff coverage yesterday. Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes. Packers are going to have to score a lot.
Yeah.
They're going to have to score a lot, even if they have Jair Alexander and Evan Williams. You don't know if Jair is going to be any good if he does come back. They haven't stopped the Lions. They haven't stopped the Vikings. Sure, they stopped the Seahawks. Well, I'll give them the Seahawks because they had a very good passing game. That was a good game. They didn't stop, or they stopped the Saints, obviously. A big part of that Seahawks game, though, was the pass rush. And this is where I want to transition into now, Doug. A big reason why Geno Smith and co weren't able to get anything going was because the pass rush got home. Yesterday, pass rush was abysmal. Sure, they collapsed the pocket a couple times. They got some pressure. But this is why sacks ultimately matter more than pressures. Mike Smith, former Packers outside linebackers coach, back when Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith were both here, would always pump up pressures. And I get that. They're important. They affect plays. But the ultimate determination of whether a play is a negative one or a positive one in most cases is a sack, because that ends the play. If you pressure a guy like Sam Darnold, even though he's not the most mobile quarterback, he can get out. He can navigate the pocket. He made a couple nice throws under pressure yesterday for completions. He was spinning it. Packers just couldn't get home. I think they had 1 sack yesterday. Matt LaFleur was asked today basically what he saw from his pass rush. Were they getting pressure and just not getting home? What did he think? And man, he was not happy in the slightest. He said it wasn't good enough. We've got to be better. They did some nice things in protection where they were bringing the tight end down and max protecting. But usually when that happens, you should glove whatever concept because there's only 3 guys out, meaning if there's a tight end in there blocking, he's not out pass catching. There are only 3 guys running routes. And LaFleur said they were still finding ways to get completions. That's why they always say rush plus coverage, because the coverage is way better when the DBs have less time to cover because the rush gets home. And if the coverage is good at the onset, knocking guys off their routes and the such, pass rush has more time to get home. Both were bad yesterday.
No question. And again, you look at the way that this team has performed. I mean, there's just such a dichotomy, such a difference between when they play these elite teams as opposed to, the Seahawks are a good team. They're not a great team. They beat
Not in the playoffs.
No, I mean, the Cardinals are mid. They are flirting with 500 or flirted with 500. I don't think that they can make it anymore, but they were.
Texans stink.
Texans stink now. We looked at that as, really quality win at the time. Texans stink right now.
Beat the Rams, but without their top two receivers.
Yeah, did that. So I'm struggling to find. I mean, they've had some complete games. They've had some complete wins, but they haven't been against very good teams. We thought at the time maybe that these teams were better. But I guess that's the beauty of the NFL, because nobody thought that the Vikings were going to be nearly as good as they've turned out to be with as much individual talent at the skill positions that they had going into it. We just didn't know that Sam Darnold was going to, recreate his sophomore year in college. So that I think is making, if you just listen to any of the shows on the game, or if you read social media, or which nobody should on any circumstances ever, but there's just a lot of panic going on right now. And normally I'm just relax. Everything's going to be okay. Just let it play out. That's just kind of my MO. But I think there's some real legitimate panicky concern, because at week 17, with one more week to go against a really bad Bears team, you know what the issues are against these good teams. They just keep doing it. And injuries part of it, sure. But just the silly mistakes, the pre-snap penalties. I still don't think that it was the proper call on Edgerrin Cooper, but they weren't able to, and Matt LaFleur talked about it after the game too. He's like, he didn't agree with the call. And yes, it was 3 points that got tacked on to the Vikings tally, and they lost by 2, but they still had 30 minutes to turn that around. And up until the last several minutes of the game, the last half of the last quarter, the last 7 minutes of the game or so, the Packers weren't really showing up. And I love the fact that they had a lot of fight in them. I love the fact that they put up 15 points in the fourth quarter. I love the fact that they finally got the Vikings off the field in a 3-and-out, but it was just too little too late at that point.
Yeah, you can play the what-if game with a lot of that. The Wicks illegal formation that Matt LaFleur also disagreed with.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do that and Josh Jacobs converts, who knows what happens? But instead, they're back to a 3-5. Jordan Love hoists a prayer up to a tightly covered Bo Melton. And by the way, Matt LaFleur spoke about this after the game. And if you're wondering why there weren't many deep shots or deep completions for the Packers, Matt LaFleur basically said, in response to a question about that, did you see how loose they were playing? So the Vikings were intentionally not letting the Packers beat them over the top. And guess what? It also didn't help that the Packers didn't have the one player who's most capable of taking the top off of defense, and that's Christian Watson.
Yep.
We'll see if his knee is better to play this week. I don't subscribe to the notion, you should rest him because you're probably going to get the 7 seed, get him healthy for the playoffs. If he's healthy enough to play, he should play.
Mm-hmm. This was
because
a meaningful
guess
game.
what? If you have 2 games off, forget the seeding. Seeding is a reason to play, but also, who knows if you come back from a 2-game absence, how much rust there is. If you can knock some of that off after a game off against the Bears in what should be a comfortable win, even though they only beat them by 1 last time, then you should do it. So if maybe if some guys are on the fence with injuries, maybe they rest them because it's a regular season game. If it were the playoffs, they might play.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the Packers should be super conservative in this game. But yes, the reason that you didn't see many of those is because Watson wasn't in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not what the Vikings were giving the Packers with their defense yesterday. Another thing I want to touch on, something that was a little bit concerning if you're a Packer fan. I mean, it's just one coach out-coaching another. It's not the first time Matt LaFleur's been out-coached. It's not the last time he'll be out-coached or out-schemed in a certain aspect of the game. He mentioned last night that the Vikings and Brian Flores played more man defense, at least early in the game, than the Packers thought they would. That's in part what Matt LaFleur attributed the slow start to. He said that he puts it on himself. He did not have an adequate enough package of plays to counter man coverage that he could implement with the offense and have Jordan Love go run them and try and attack a coverage or coverages that the Packers didn't necessarily anticipate coming. That's being outcoached. That's just what it is. It's going to happen. Would you like it to happen in your 5th game against one of these elite teams and have the result of that outcoaching being yet another slow start? No, it's untimely, but it's going to happen.
Yep.
And you got to make sure it doesn't happen in a win or go home game, because if you have a season-ending loss and you get up there and say, they caught us off guard, it's not going to look good. And sure, there's a lot of unscouted looks. You can't prepare for everything. You only have so much time in a week. It's just, it is what it is. Brian Flores got the better of Matt LaFleur. That's just what it is.
No question. And, when we talk about, Matt LaFleur doesn't get outcoached very often, and he doesn't. But like you said, it does happen sometimes. It did happen, especially through the first 3.5 quarters of their loss against the Vikings. It's concerning because it's not like the competition, Chicago aside, it's not like the competition is going to get any better. And that's the one thing that really is concerning when Matt LaFleur does stand up at the podium and says, I've got to coach better. We've got to coach better. We've got to play better. Well, these are the teams that are going to end your season. And, I know I'm a broken record right now, but the Packers have kind of been that broken record this season against those elite teams. They come close. They don't give up. I mean, listen, there are a lot of teams, like I think the Cowboys may have quit yesterday, and they've been playing really good football for Mike McCarthy. I don't know if they're trying to save his job. I know that they're, Cooper Rush quarterback instead of Dak Prescott. There's a whole thing going on there, but I don't know that they showed up necessarily yesterday. I see fight in the Packers. Even when they're down big, they still try to come back and make it a game. And if it weren't for that 3rd down fingertip catch at the end of the game, maybe there would have been another opportunity for the Packers to get the ball. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they would have gone for it on 4th down. Not sure. But there may have been another opportunity for Jordan Love to pull some magic out of his hat. So one play here, one play there. But at one point it looked like, all right, just shower up, go home and accept your fate as the number 7 seed, get ready for Chicago. Don't expose anybody to unnecessary risk and get ready for the playoffs. And to their credit, they fought like hell. And they did that the first time they played the Vikings too. They fought like hell.
That's fine. And I think that's admirable. Because in seasons past, they haven't always done that.
Exactly.
But
I'm also trying to polish a turd right now, too, and I realize that.
Also, they're not taking these as moral victories. So when I say that phrase, I'm not saying the Packers are considering this a moral victory. But at some point, enough with these, we're getting close, and one more chance, and we just have to fix a couple things. Because like I said, your next chance might be your last.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
you're going to Philly you're going to Philly most likely in 2 weeks. And one too many false starts or one too many offsides or one too many drops, your season's over. You're going to Cancun. And that's just what it is. I keep saying that. I just keep saying that's just what it is. Because maybe it's just the fact of the matter is the Packers are not a great team. They're not true Super Bowl contenders. And maybe it's my fault for, putting so much on one game. Because if the Packers had won yesterday, I'd be sitting here saying they're true Super Bowl contenders. So they lost by 2, and I'm saying they're not. Maybe that's my fault for putting so much in such a fine margin, if you know what I'm saying. But with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of a sample size of 5 games against these teams, yes, like I said, the average margin of defeat is only 4.4 points. But it's the same themes that keep coming up.
What I was going to say is I feel like we've done this show before.
We have.
And that's why sometimes it feels like I'm struggling to come up with a different way of saying the same thing. Whether it was
there isn't a different way to say it. That's the thing.
I know. It's the same thing. I could have pulled out the tape of the show that we did after week 4. A lot of the same themes. Could have pulled out after either one of the losses against the Lions. A lot of the same themes. And they've gone on a heater and then they've cooled off a little bit. You always know that there's going to be a clunker. Most teams have a clunker near the end of the season. Sometimes it's in the playoffs. You hope it's never in the playoffs, but sometimes it is. And it just, when you get swept by the 2 teams that are ahead of you in your own division, and you get swept in much the same fashion, that's when you start to struggle with, all right, well, We've talked about, I'm saying them as a team, we've talked about how to correct this. Now, why can't we go out and correct this?
Right. And that's something the Packers have to figure out here real quick.
Yeah,
And
'cause
maybe
there's
they
no
can
more time.
use this Sunday's game against the Bears as kind of a training ground, if you will, or a, test run for maybe working some things out. Josh Jacobs kind of ominously ended his post-game presser yesterday in front of his locker by saying, "We figured some things out early in the game. I'm not gonna divulge it, but you'll see." I feel like I've heard him say that before too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It just feels like Groundhog's Day. Matt LaFleur is saying the exact same quote about needing to earn a chance to play these guys again. Xavier McKinney's standing up there saying, if we want to change the narrative, we got to do something about it. We felt this before. We know what it feels like. We can't say we're even with these teams because we can't beat them. And Josh Jacobs is standing there saying, we keep making self-inflicted errors. It's week 17.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, at least, you could lean on, okay, they beat the Lions and the Chiefs, like I said, and it was a super young team. Jordan Love's first year starting. They were playing with more house money, as I said. Now the expectations are higher. And if the Packers are one and done in the playoffs, even though they are probably going to finish the regular season 4 games better than they did last year, I would say it's a regression this year. And is it their fault that the NFC North is the best division in recent history? Or ever, maybe? No. But in relation to the other teams in the NFC, the Packers, I would say, have regressed unless they can go on an impressive playoff run, which, of course, they still could. They could go into Philly and beat Philly, I think. I would be even more surprised if they won 2 games, but they have talent. When Jordan Love was asked yesterday, what separates you from the Eagles, Lions, and Vikings? He said, not much. Sure, in the moment, you're thinking, well, then why can't you beat at least one of them? And fans are up in arms.
Mm-hmm.
But he's right. Not much separates them. They lost to the Vikings twice by 2. Granted, I'm not an idiot. Sometimes I am. I understand that the Vikings are playing prevent, and they're fine giving up yardage and touchdowns in a 3-score game. So I understand these scores are probably a little bit misleading. But at the same time, a 2-point game is a 2-point game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if the Vikings were that much better, they would do what the Packers did to the Saints. They just stifle them the whole game. The Packers have talent. We've seen it.
Mm-hmm. They've
just got to step up and deliver. But at this point, Doug, nothing has told me that they can when it matters most against these elite teams.
Yeah, and when Matt stands up there, LaFleur, and I like Matt, and he'll in years past has said things like, "Yeah, we shouldn't have abandoned the run as early as we did." Oh, okay, you're the guy with the clipboard, you know. So it's all of these things are fixable. They are. It's just a matter of execution now. It's a matter of recognizing what's going wrong, how to correct it, and then going out there and doing it. This team, here's where I'll gently disagree with you a little bit. I don't think that the team regressed this year. I think they've already, even though if they have an earlier exit, I would never judge an entire season based on one 60-minute game. I won't do that. So even if they get bounced in the first round and they beat the Cowboys and beat them like a drum last year in the wild card round and got to the divisional round, I would never judge an entire season based on one game. I don't think that's fair. And they're a better team this year. I don't think they've regressed. I think they're already ahead of where they were. Just everybody else in the division is so much better than what they were a year ago.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's not their fault, but it is their problem.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying in relation to the rest of the NFC, they're standing in the NFL. It seems as though they've regressed. And that was last year just based on where they ended up, not where they kind of started the playoffs. So they're going to get the 7th seed again. They're going to have a better record, but
I think they're a better team. I believe they're a better
themselves.
team
Are the Packers more talented this year than they were last year?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm saying they regress in the sense that last year they were 1 quarter away from making the NFC Championship game. I think they're further away from being top of the NFC this year than they were at the end of last year.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
And I think a lot of that's based on how much better the Vikings are.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Year.
I'm saying the Packers themselves as individual talents or as a team talent, they have not regressed. I'm saying their standing with relation to the rest of the NFC has taken a dip. And you can argue that, okay, do you judge regression based on, do you have a better team on paper, or are you closer to competing for a Super Bowl than last year? There are two different ways to look at it. I'm looking at it as, are the Packers closer to competing for a Super Bowl, or do I expect them to be closer to competing for a Super Bowl than they were last year? And the answer is no. Do they have a more talented team on paper? Sure. But I'm looking at it from a different way.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, not only do I think they have a better team on paper, I think they have a better team on the field. And to me, that's not regression, but I think we're arguing different things.
Right, of course. After the break, we're going to take a listen to some audio, very passionate audio from Packers head coach Matt LaFleur today, defending tight end Tucker Kraft and a potentially controversial low block he had on Pat Jones, the Vikings defensive end, yesterday. You'll want to hear that. Matt LaFleur doesn't often get this fired up, but he did in defense of Tucker Kraft. Stick with us. It's the Matt Schneidman Show right here on The Game.
She did If you don't wanna see me.
All right, before we get out of here on this fine Monday, December 30th, I want to play you some audio from Packers head coach Matt LaFleur, who was asked today, well, I guess you'll hear that it's my voice, about the block Tucker Kraft had early in the second quarter yesterday, where he comes around the formation, lowers his right shoulder into the right leg of Pat Jones II, the Vikings edge rusher, to clear space for a Josh Jacobs 5-yard run. Jones suffers a knee injury on the play, does not return. Kevin O'Connell said this morning that he is in play to play against Detroit this weekend. So thankfully it's not a significant injury, but crowd was booing Tucker Kraft mercilessly. Jonathan Grenard, Vikings edge rusher, took to Twitter, told Kraft last night to be a man and block up high. So Matt LaFleur was asked today about the block and the criticism of it. Did you get another look at the block Tucker had on Jones, their edge guy, where he got hurt? Grenard came out online and said it was a completely dirty.
Yeah, it's the same thing that their guys were doing to our defensive ends. Okay, it's a cross sift. I mean, I don't know what, it's a totally legal play. It's just, you got to defeat the block, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, Cox got sawed off by Johnny Munt one time, and they got somebody else. They did it to us twice in the game. So, like, what are we talking about? Like, I get it. As a defensive player, they don't like it. I think Troy's already come out and said that he wants to eliminate low blocks around the league. Like, but it's part of the game. And so if you don't want to get those types of blocks, you can't be so out of control. And we get it too with our defensive ends. You know, if we're flying off the ball, like, you're going to get cross sift. And that's a way to try to slow down just the speed off the edge. And it's a great equalizer. That's tough for an offense to have to deal with that. And so you got to have some sort of recourse to try to slow somebody down. Otherwise, you're going to put everybody at risk. Your quarterbacks, guys are just going to tee off. But we'll see how, what happens in the future. But, it's no different than what are we talking about? Like low tackles. I mean, you see that around the league all the time. Then we should eliminate all low hits below the knee, period. And when receivers catch a ball and they're going across the middle, and a safety, who I won't name, goes and saws their legs out. I mean, it happens all. It's so, like, we should get rid of all that then, if that's the case.
That safety, who Matt LaFleur doesn't want to name, it's pretty obvious who he's talking about. He's talking about Kirby Joseph from the Lions.
Yeah.
I wrote that. I was that confident that Matt LaFleur was referring to him that I wrote that in my story about that today. But, I mean, you get what he's saying. Defenders shouldn't be happy about that, but it's a legal play. Tucker Kraft, ironically, was the one who called out Kirby Joseph for making contact in certain areas against guys like Tyler Higbee and TJ Hawkinson in the past. I believe torn ACLs on both plays where Joseph hit them. So Kraft kind of called Kirby Joseph out after praising him earlier this season before that Packers-Lions second game. Said he's going to avenge his tight end brothers. And it's Tucker Kraft, in the crossfire yesterday. So credit to Matt LaFleur for sticking up for his guy. Credit to the Vikings for sticking up for their guy. I see no problem with any of it, really. It's just, again, what it is. It's the nature of the beast.
Football's a tough sport.
It certainly is.
Don't
That's why I've never played it, because I'm not tough.
Well, you kick field goals.
Well, yeah, that's maybe the Vikings could use me.
Yeah. There you go.
That might be their one weakness, and he's been pretty good all this year.
He's been pretty good. And I was driving my dad to the airport today, and he's like, "Why did they get 3 cracks at it yesterday at the end of the first half?" And I had to explain the whole Edgerrin Cooper phantom
offsides,
penalty.
a timeout.
Yep.
And you knew he was making the second one.
Oh,
after the offsides penalty.
Oh, yeah.
And again, you can say, that's 3 points that the Packers gave them with the Wicks illegal formation. Then they ended up having to punt. Then on that drive, Edgerrin Cooper had the offsides. But then if the Vikings are only up 14 at the end, maybe they don't play the style of defense they played to let the Packers march down the field when they were up 3 scores. So you can play the what-if game. Bottom line is the Packers lost.
Yep.
27-25. They're currently in the number 7 seed. That's probably where they're going to end up for the playoffs unless Packers beat the Bears and the Commanders lose at the Cowboys, which is unlikely to happen, but it could. Who knows? Those two teams played tough earlier this year. I forget who won, but look, the Cowboys beat the Bucs the other day. They got smoked by the Eagles yesterday. Who knows what kind of team Mike McCarthy is going to trot out there. Bottom line is Packers need to win and the Commanders to lose to secure that number 6 seed. And even then, it's not a guarantee you go into Tampa or LA and win, or Atlanta if Atlanta makes the playoffs.
Yeah. And the only thing that I'll leave you with is this. And I go back to my favorite season that I like to reference all the time, 2010. Their wild card game was at Philadelphia. That's all I got.
A lot of parallels there.
Yeah. Different players, different teams, different era. But
exactly.
Same stadium.
Is history going to repeat itself this year? We shall see. No show tomorrow, correct, Doug?
Correct. No show tomorrow on New Year's Eve.
We will be back on Wednesday. I believe Hunter will be back in the chair after he's done.
Actually, I think you're back on Friday because New Year's Day, there's no show. And then Thursday's the feast, and then Friday.
So next show's Friday.
I will double check that, but I believe that's correct, yes.
All right. We'll talk to you then. Appreciate everybody for listening.